In a wolf pack, the natural order is simple. The strong command and the weak obey. Those born without a wolf spirit, the wolfless ones, exist somewhere below even obedience. They exist to be forgotten. Sera had learned this truth carved into her bones by 18 years of silence, 18 years of lowered eyes and bitten tongues, 18 years of being the girl whose wolf never came, whose spirit remained hollow where others burned bright. The ghostling, they called her, the empty one, the mistake that should have been drowned at birth. 3 copper coins, that was the sum of her existence. 3 small circles of tarnished metal pressed into a palm cracked from years of thankless labor. But in a rusted cage at the edge of a crowded market, something waited beneath a filthy sack, something small and broken and forgotten, something marked as cursed by those too blind to see the fire burning behind eyes no one dared to meet. In 3 months, every alpha who laughed would kneel. In 3 months, the girl without a wolf would make kings bow. The transformation was about to begin. All it cost was 3 copper coins and the courage to love what the world had left to die. Sera woke to darkness, her body already aching from yesterday's labor. The cold had crept through the cracks in her shelter walls, settling into her bones like a curse that never lifted. She rose without complaint. Complaints were for wolves who mattered. For her, there was only duty, endless, invisible, thankless duty. The pack house loomed against the pre-dawn sky as she approached. Inside, real wolves slept in warmth and comfort. She slipped through the servants' entrance and began her work. Scrubbing. Always scrubbing. Her knees pressed against cold stone, her hands already cracked and bleeding gripped the rough brush. She worked in silence, erasing the muddy footprints of wolves who would never know her name. Ghost girls early today. Sera's stomach dropped. 3 young wolves blocked the hallway, their eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Look at her," one sneered, "scrubbing like a dog. At least dogs have wolves inside them." A boot kicked her bucket. Filthy water splashed across the floor she'd just cleaned. "Oops," laughter echoed off the walls. "Better start over, ghostling." They left her kneeling in the mess, their mockery fading down the corridor. Sera cleaned the floor again. She didn't cry. Crying required hope, and hope had abandoned her years ago. By mid-morning, the cook pressed 3 copper coins into her palm. "Soap and salt, don't dawdle." The market offered brief freedom, the only taste of it she ever knew. Sera moved through the crowded square like smoke, unseen and unremarkable, until Lyra found her. Beta Cain's daughter stepped into her path, golden hair shining, lips curled in disgust. "Well, well, the ghost pretends to be human." Sera lowered her eyes. Submission. Survival. "Even mutts have more worth than you," Lyra continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "At least they have wolves inside. You're just empty, a shell walking around wasting food that real wolves could eat." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sera absorbed it like blows. Then something shifted. A trader's cart creaked into the square and every wolf nearby tensed. They stepped back from one particular cage, rusted, shadowed, wrong somehow. Even Lyra faltered, her cruelty momentarily forgotten. But Sera felt no fear, only a strange, desperate pull. She walked toward the cage as though hypnotized. Inside, beneath a filthy burlap sack, something small and skeletal fought to breathe, barely alive, completely forgotten, just like her. She knelt in the mud, peering through the bars. The pup's eyes opened. Gold, blazing, ancient gold. And in those eyes, Sera saw something that stopped her heart cold. Intelligence. Recognition, a soul that knew her. The pull was undeniable, terrifying, absolute. Sera couldn't explain it, this invisible thread drawing her toward a dying creature in a rusted cage. Her mind screamed warnings. Her heart refused to listen. "Girl, step back." The trader's voice carried genuine fear. "That one's cursed. Won't eat, won't drink. Had it 3 weeks now. Should have been dead 2 weeks ago. Something unnatural keeping it breathing." Sera didn't step back. She stepped closer. "How much?" The trader's eyes widened. "You deaf? I said it's cursed. Whatever's wrong with that beast, you don't want it touching your life." "How much?" Behind her, laughter erupted. Lyra's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. "Oh, this is precious. The wolfless girl wants to buy the dying pup. What a perfect match. 2 broken things that nobody wants." More laughter. Wolves gathered to watch the spectacle, their amusement sharp as teeth. 3 coppers, the trader said quickly, sensing opportunity in madness. "Take it and whatever darkness follows." 3 coppers. Her soap money, her salt money, everything she'd earned from a month of bleeding knuckles and aching knees. Sera's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket. The coins felt heavier than they should, weighted with consequence, with finality, with something that felt terrifyingly like fate. She placed them in the trader's palm. "Fool," someone muttered. "Dead by night half," another predicted. "Cursed calling to cursed," Lyra announced. "Let the ghost have her ghost. They deserve each other." Sera lifted the cage without responding. It weighed almost nothing. The creature inside was more skeleton than substance. She walked through the laughing crowd with her head down, clutching her purchase against her chest like something precious. Because somehow, impossibly, it was. Her shelter was a single room at the territory's edge, barely standing, barely warm, barely acknowledged as habitation. She set the cage on her only table and knelt before it, hands shaking. The burlap sack came away slowly, gently, revealing what lay beneath. A pup, gray as storm clouds, thin as winter branches, dark markings traced through his fur in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, symbols she didn't recognize, couldn't read, but felt in her hollow chest like whispered words. "Ash," she breathed. The name came unbidden, inevitable. "I'll call you Ash." The pup didn't move, didn't blink. Those golden eyes simply watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You must be thirsty." She filled a cracked bowl with water from her only pitcher, water she'd meant to last 3 days. She placed it before him, expecting nothing. He drank. Slowly at first, then deeply, as though her offering had unlocked something his body had been refusing. Hungry? The bread was stale, the meat was her dinner for the week. She gave him everything without hesitation. He ate. And as he ate, something extraordinary happened. His breathing steadied, his trembling stopped. The film of death that had clouded his eyes began to clear, revealing depths of gold that seemed to go on forever. "You understand me," Sera whispered. Not a question, a realization. "You actually understand." The pup, Ash, lifted his head. He looked at her with an expression no animal should possess. Then, deliberately, unmistakably, he dipped his head. A nod. Sera's blood turned to ice. She barely slept that night, watching him from her corner pallet. Every hour she expected to find him dead. Every hour he grew stronger instead. His breathing deepened, his fur began to regain its luster. The dark markings seemed to shift in the candlelight, rearranging themselves into new configurations she couldn't track. By dawn, the pup that should have been dead was standing, strong, alert, transformed, and he was watching her with eyes that held no animal blankness, only ancient, infinite patience. The patience of something that had been waiting a very, very long time. For her. 7 days. 7 impossible days. Sera watched Ash grow with a mixture of wonder and growing terror. Each morning he was larger than the night before, not gradually, the way pups naturally developed, but dramatically, impossibly, as though weeks compressed into hours. By day 3, he doubled in size. By day 5, he stood as tall as her knee. By day 7, he was nearly full-grown, his gray fur thick and lustrous, his golden eyes burning with intelligence that made her breath catch every time they met hers. But it was the markings that truly frightened her. Silver threads had begun emerging through his coat, thin at first, barely visible, then spreading like frost across winter glass. They formed patterns, symbols, ancient shapes that stirred something deep in her hollow chest, as though her missing wolf recognized what her human mind could not. And then there was the bond. She felt him now, constantly, a warm presence at the edge of her consciousness, like a second heartbeat pulsing alongside her own. When she worked in the pack house, she sensed his alertness. When she walked to market, she felt his concern. When she slept, his dreams bled into hers, fractured images of places she'd never seen, faces she didn't recognize, power she couldn't comprehend. He brought her things. The brush she'd been searching for dropped at her feet before she'd finished looking. Her missing sock retrieved from where it had fallen behind her pallet. Once he nudged her ankle seconds before Draven rounded the corner, giving her time to bow her head, to make herself invisible, to survive. He was protecting her, but the changes weren't invisible. "You've been standing differently." Marta the cook studied her with narrowed eyes. "Straighter, prouder almost." Sera forced her shoulders down. "I don't know what you mean." But she did. The hollow ache in her chest felt less empty now. The weight of her worthlessness pressed less heavily. Something was filling the space where her wolf should have been, something warm and fierce and utterly foreign. Others noticed too. Beta Cain stopped her in the hallway one morning, his cold eyes examining her face with uncomfortable intensity. "You seem different, Ghostling, less broken." He said the word like an accusation. "What's changed?" "Nothing, sir." Her voice trembled. "Nothing at all." He let her pass, but she felt his suspicion following her like a blade pressed between her shoulder blades. That night, everything shifted. She was sitting with Ash, running her fingers through his silver-threaded fur, when the first image exploded through her mind. A great hall, black stone walls rising to impossible heights, wolves in silver regalia standing in perfect formation, their eyes burning gold like ashes, their presence radiating power that made reality itself seem to bend. Then, fire. Screaming. Blood on marble floors. Wolves she didn't recognize tearing through the silver-clad guardians. A massive wolf with a scarred face leading the assault. A female wolf falling, her body shielding something small and gray. Sera gasped, wrenching herself back to the present. Ash was pressed against her, trembling, his eyes locked on hers with desperate intensity. And through their bond, cutting through the chaos of images like a blade through smoke, one word formed clear as spoken sound. "Hide me." She grabbed his face, her heart hammering. What? Hide you from what? Another image slammed into her consciousness, wolves in black, moving through the territory, searching, hunting, getting closer with every passing moment. They're coming. The announcement came at dawn. Alpha Varn stood on the packhouse steps, his scarred face grave with manufactured concern. Sera watched from the back of the gathered crowd, her blood running cold with every word. "Dangerous animals have been spotted near our borders, beasts of unknown origin, possibly diseased, possibly rabid. For the safety of the pack, enforcers will conduct a thorough search of all dens and shelters." His eyes swept the crowd. "Anyone harboring suspicious creatures will face immediate judgment." Sera stopped breathing. Around her, wolves murmured with confusion and curiosity. They didn't understand. How could they? But she felt Ash's fear pulsing through their bond like a second heartbeat, urgent, desperate, knowing. They weren't looking for rabid animals, they were looking for him. She slipped away before the crowd dispersed, running through back paths she'd memorized during years of avoiding attention. Her shelter waited at the territory's edge, small and forgotten, but not forgotten enough. "The root cellar," she gasped, bursting through her door. "Now." Ash understood immediately. He flowed down the ladder into the darkness below, his massive form somehow folding into the cramped space. Sera threw the trapdoor shut, dragged her threadbare rug over it, and tried to slow her racing heart. The knock came an hour later. "Open up, Ghostling." Draven's voice dripped with anticipation. "Enforcer business." She opened the door with trembling hands. Draven pushed past her, his cruel eyes scanning every corner of her single room. 2 other enforcers followed, overturning her meager possessions, scattering her few belongings across the floor. "Heard you bought something at the market last week. A dying animal. Where is it?" "Dead." The lie came easier than expected, like everyone said it would be. "Then you won't mind if we look around." They searched everywhere, under her pallet, behind her woodpile, inside her small chest of clothes. Draven's frustration grew with each empty space, his movements becoming rougher, more aggressive. He stopped near the rug. Sera's heart seized. "Something's wrong here," he muttered, nostrils flaring. "I can feel it, smell it almost." Beneath the floor, she felt Ash go utterly still, not just quiet, absent, as though he'd somehow erased his own existence, becoming nothing more than shadow and silence. Draven's boot hovered over the rug. One kick, one glance, everything would end. Then his companion called from outside. "Draven, Kane wants us at the eastern border, now." The boot lowered. Draven shot her a venomous glare. "This isn't over, Ghostling. I know you're hiding something." They left. Sera collapsed against the wall, her legs unable to hold her. She didn't move the rug until nightfall. When she did, Ash emerged unchanged, but something in his eyes had hardened. He knew how close they'd come. They both did. The knock that came at midnight was softer, older. Elder Mira stood in the moonlight, her ancient face carved with shadows and secrets. She was the pack's oldest member, 90 winters old, they said, with memories stretching back to times most wolves considered legend. "May I enter, child?" Sera couldn't refuse an elder. She stepped aside. Mira moved slowly, her clouded eyes scanning the room until they landed on Ash. She went utterly still. "Show me his markings." "Elder, I don't—" "Show me." Ash stepped forward himself, turning to display the silver symbols woven through his fur. Mira's weathered hand flew to her mouth, her face drained of color. "Impossible," she breathed. "We killed them all. Varn swore they were all dead." "Who? What are you talking about?" Mira's eyes were haunted when they met hers. "The Shadow Court, an ancient line of Alpha Kings who ruled before our packs existed. They were destroyed 20 years ago, every last one, down to the nursing pups." Her gaze returned to Ash. "Down to the heirs." "Why? What did they do?" "They were too powerful, too old. The other alphas feared what they couldn't control." Mira gripped Sera's arm with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully, child. If Varn discovers what you're hiding, he won't just kill it. He'll kill you. He'll kill everyone who ever spoke to you. He'll burn this shelter to ash and salt the earth beneath." "Why? Why would he—" "Because he led the massacre himself." Mira's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "He built his power on their graves, and if the world learns an heir survived—" She looked at Ash, at his silver markings, his ancient golden eyes, his impossible presence. "Child, you haven't rescued a stray. You found the last heir to a murdered throne." That night, Ash showed her everything. The bond between them opened like a floodgate, and Sera drowned in memories that weren't hers. 20 years of buried truth poured through her consciousness, vivid, visceral, devastating. She saw the shadow court in its glory, a fortress of black stone rising against snow-capped mountains, wolves in silver regalia moving through torch-lit corridors, power humming through every stone, every breath, every heartbeat. A kingdom of ancient blood and older magic, ruled by those who remembered what wolves were meant to be. Then came the night of fire. She felt Ash's terror as he felt it, a pup, barely weaned, torn from sleep by screaming, his mother's arms around him, carrying him through smoke-filled passages. Everywhere chaos, everywhere death. Wolves he'd known his entire short life falling beneath the teeth of invaders. Not one pack, many. A coalition of betrayers united by fear and greed. And leading them all, a massive wolf with cold eyes and a face marked with fresh scars. Varn. Younger then, but unmistakable. The same cruel mouth, the same calculating gaze, the same absolute certainty that power justified any atrocity. Sera watched through Ash's eyes as Varn cornered his mother in a dead-end chamber, watched as she pressed her pup into a hidden alcove, covering him with her own body, watched as Varn's jaws closed around her throat while she whispered words Ash was too young to understand, words he understood now. The heir will return with the one who sees worth in ashes. Together they will make the false kings kneel. His vision shifted. A loyal servant bleeding from a dozen wounds, smuggling Ash through a secret passage. Traders paid in gold to carry him far from Shadow Court territory. Drugs forced down his throat, keeping him dormant, keeping him hidden, keeping him alive in a half-death that lasted 2 decades, until the drugs wore off, until his body began dying without connection to his ancestral power, until a wolfless girl in a muddy market spent her last 3 coins on something everyone else had abandoned. "You saved me," Ash's voice resonated through her mind, clear now, strong, ancient beyond his apparent age. But it was more than saving. Your compassion unlocked what the drugs had suppressed. Your belief in my worth awakened power that had slept for 20 years. Sera was crying. She hadn't realized until she felt tears dripping from her chin. "I didn't know. I couldn't leave you there." "Exactly." Warmth flooded their bond. "You saw value where others saw trash. You showed mercy when cruelty was easier. That's why the prophecy named you." "Named me?" Ash rose to his full height, massive now, magnificent, every inch the heir to a murdered throne. His silver markings blazed in the darkness like living constellations. "My mother called you the one who sees worth in ashes. You are my anchor, Sera. Without you, my power would have consumed me before I could control it. Without you, I would have died in that cage, not from sickness, but from being unmoored, untethered, alone." He pressed his great head against her chest, and she felt centuries of loneliness bleeding through their connection, centuries of waiting, centuries of hoping that somewhere, someone existed who could see past the brokenness to the king beneath. "You are not wolfless," he projected fiercely. "You never were. Your wolf was simply waiting, waiting for a bloodline strong enough to call it forth, waiting for me." Sera's hollow chest pulsed with something she'd never felt before, something warm and fierce and impossibly alive. "What happens now?" she whispered. Ash's golden eyes met hers, blazing with purpose that made the air tremble. "My mother's last words were a prophecy," he projected, each word ringing like a struck bell. "The heir will return with the one who sees worth in ashes. Together they will make the false kings kneel." He turned toward the door, toward the territory beyond, toward the Alpha who had built his empire on the bones of Ash's family. It's time to make them kneel. They came at sunset. Sera heard the boots first, heavy, deliberate, marching in formation. Then came the voices, sharp with authority. Then came the presence that made every wolf in the territory lower their eyes. Alpha Varn had come himself. She stood in her doorway, heart pounding against her ribs, as the most powerful wolf in the region approached her worthless shelter with 6 enforcers at his back. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, burned with deadly purpose. Ghostling. He didn't bother with her name. She wasn't worth a name. I've heard interesting rumors, something about an unusual pet that survived when it shouldn't have, something that's been growing faster than nature allows. Sera forced her voice steady. Just a stray, Alpha, nothing unusual. Then you won't mind showing me? With respect, Alpha, no. Silence crashed over the gathering like a physical blow. Omegas didn't refuse Alphas. It wasn't done. It wasn't possible. The natural order forbade it absolutely. Yet here she stood, spine straight, chin lifted, defying the wolf who ruled them all. Varn's eyes narrowed. What did you just say to me? I said, no. Something shifted in his expression, confusion giving way to suspicion, suspicion giving way to dread. He'd seen defiance before, but never from someone like her. Never from prey, unless the prey wasn't prey anymore. Search the shelter, he commanded. Tear it apart if you must. The enforcers surged forward, and Ash stepped out of the shadows. He was magnificent, terrifying, massive beyond any natural wolf, his gray fur blazing with silver markings that pulsed like living starlight. His golden eyes burned with power older than the pack, older than the territory, older than the false hierarchy Varn had built on stolen bones. Every enforcer stopped dead. Varn's eyes went white. No, the word escaped him like a dying breath. No, we killed them all. We made sure. Every heir, every pup, every... You missed one. Sera's voice rang with new authority. And you made a mistake, Varn. You let someone worthless find him, someone invisible, someone you never bothered to watch because she didn't matter. She stepped beside Ash, their bond singing with shared purpose. She mattered enough to save a king. Varn's fear crystallized into recognition, and recognition into absolute terror. Shadow Court, the markings, the eyes, your Shadow Court. I am Ash. The projection thundered through every mind present. Last heir of the murdered throne, son of the queen you slaughtered. And I remember your face, false Alpha. I remember your teeth in my mother's throat. The enforcers lunged. They froze mid-step. Ash's power crashed over them like a wave, pinning them in place, muscles locked, lungs struggling. 6 trained killers rendered helpless by a wolf who hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. But Sera felt the cost through their bond, the strain, the burning. Ash was strong, but not strong enough, not yet. The effort was tearing him apart from within. I can't hold them, he projected to her alone. Run, now! Varn saw it too, the trembling, the flicker in those blazing markings. His terror transformed into savage triumph. He's weak, Varn roared. The power's not complete. Kill them both, now! The enforcers broke free. Sera grabbed Ash's fur and ran. They crashed through the shelter's back wall, splinters exploding around them. The forest swallowed them as chaos erupted behind, howls and commands and the thunder of pursuit. Sera ran harder than she'd ever run. Ash bounded beside her, his strength fading with every stride, but his determination burning brighter.
Behind them, cutting through the darkness like a blade of pure hatred, Varn's howl echoed across the entire territory. "Find them! 1,000 gold for their heads! Every pack, every wolf, every hunter in the region, I want them dead before dawn." His voice cracked with fear disguised as fury. "The Shadow Court dies tonight."
They ran for 3 days, through forests that clawed at their skin, across rivers that numbed their bones, over hills that stole their breath and gave nothing back. Behind them, always behind them, the howls of hunters echoed through the wilderness like a promise of death. Varn's message had spread like wildfire. Shadow Court heir lives. Kill on sight. Anyone who helps them dies with them. Every pack in the region joined the hunt. 1,000 gold was more than most wolves earned in a lifetime. But it wasn't just greed driving them. It was fear. Fear of what the Shadow Court had been. Fear of what it could become again. Sera's legs screamed for rest. Her lungs burned with every breath. But Ash pressed forward, guiding them toward mountains that rose against the horizon like black teeth biting the sky. "Cursed land," he projected. "No pack claims it. No wolf enters willingly. They've forgotten why they fear it, but their instincts remember." "What's there?" "Home." The closer they got, the stronger he became. His markings blazed brighter. His stride grew surer. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air itself feel thick, charged, alive. And Sera began changing too. She noticed it first in her senses. Sounds she shouldn't hear. A rabbit's heartbeat 50 yards away. Smells she couldn't name. Fear and pine and ancient stone. Then came the speed, her legs carrying her faster than any human should move, her feet finding purchase on terrain that should have broken her ankles. Then came the voices, whispers at first, fragments of thought bleeding through from Ash's mind, but soon others, the distant hunters, their frustration and greed painting colors in her consciousness. She was hearing thoughts. "What's happening to me?" she gasped as they paused beneath a cliff's overhang. Ash turned to her, golden eyes blazing with fierce satisfaction. "Your wolf was never missing, Sera. It was waiting, dormant, sleeping in the hollow space where you thought emptiness lived, waiting for a bloodline strong enough to call it forth, waiting for me." "The prophecy," she whispered. "The one who sees worth in ashes. You were never just my rescuer. You're my destined bond mate, the anchor who keeps my power from destroying me, and the vessel for abilities no ordinary wolf could contain." Her hollow chest pulsed with warmth. Something stirred in that long, empty space, something waking after 18 years of patient slumber. "I can feel it. Inside me. It's coming home, like us." They reached the mountains on the 4th dawn. The entrance was invisible until they stood before it, a narrow passage behind a thundering waterfall, concealed by mist and memory and magic that made the eye slide away. Warren would have walked past it 100 times without seeing. But Ash saw. Ash remembered. They stepped through the curtain of water into a valley that shouldn't exist. Black stone cliffs rose on every side, encircling a fortress of impossible architecture. Towers spiraled toward the sky, bridges arched between structures that defied gravity. And everywhere, carved into every surface, the same silver symbols that marked Ash's fur. It was ancient, abandoned, waiting. "The Shadow Court," Sera breathed. "What remains of it?" The power here was overwhelming. It pressed against her skin, seeped into her bones, called to the awakening thing in her chest with a voice like singing steel. Her vision blurred.
then sharpened beyond anything she'd experienced, colors she'd never seen, depths she'd never perceived. Her wolf was rising. Beside her, Ash began to change. His form shifted, blurred, rearranged, bones reshaped, fur receded. In seconds or hours, a young man stood where the wolf had been, tall, powerful, silver-streaked dark hair falling across features sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes that burned like embers, ancient gold flecked with dancing flames. He turned to her, and his voice, his real voice, rich and deep and resonant with centuries of royal blood, spoke aloud for the first time. "Welcome home." He extended his hand toward the waiting fortress, toward the throne room where his ancestors had ruled, toward the destiny that had been stolen 20 years ago and was finally ready to be reclaimed. Time to claim what's ours.
The fortress remembered. Torches ignited as they passed, flames that had waited 20 years for their master's return. Doors groaned open on hinges preserved by magic older than memory. Dust swirled away from their path as though swept by invisible servants who had never stopped serving. But it was the great hall that stole Sera's breath. Black glass stretched in every direction, walls, floor, ceiling, polished to a mirror shine that reflected nothing of their physical forms. Instead, the surfaces swirled with images, memories, history written in light and shadow. "Watch," Ash said softly. "See what they destroyed." The glass came alive. Sera saw the Shadow Court in its glory, not as conquerors but as guardians. She watched ancient wolves mediating disputes between warring packs, preventing bloodshed that would have devastated generations. She saw them sharing knowledge freely, teaching healing arts and hunting strategies and the old magic that made their kind more than simple beasts. She saw them protecting the weak. In vision after vision, Shadow Court wolves stood between the powerful and the powerless. They sheltered the injured, defended the outcast, built a world where strength meant responsibility, not tyranny. "They weren't monsters," she whispered. "They were balance." Ash's voice carried old grief, and balance threatened those who preferred chaos they could exploit. The glass shifted, darker now. She saw Varn, younger, hungry, ambitious, meeting secretly with other alphas. She heard his lies spreading like poison. "The Shadow Court plans to enslave us all. They'll strip our power. They'll make us kneel. We must strike first." She watched fear transform into violence, coalition armies gathering, the massacre planned in cold blood. She watched Ash's mother die again, her final words a prophecy spoken into her son's unhearing ears. The vision faded. "The central chamber," Ash said, his voice rough with centuries of suppressed rage. "That's where it ends, where it begins again." He led her deeper into the fortress, through corridors that hummed with gathering power, until they reached a circular room dominated by a single throne. Black crystal carved from a single impossible stone, radiating authority that made Sera's awakening wolf howl with recognition. "The ritual requires both. My claim as heir, your acceptance as bondmate." He turned to face her, ember eyes blazing. "I can't force this, Sera. The power must be freely given and freely received." "What happens if I accept?" "Everything changes, for both of us, forever." She looked at the throne, at the man who had been a dying pup 3 weeks ago, at the destiny she'd purchased for 3 copper coins without understanding what she was buying. 18 years of being nothing, worthless, empty. 3 weeks of being everything to someone. "I accept." The world exploded. Power crashed through her like a tidal wave, ancient and vast and absolutely overwhelming. She felt Ash beside her, drawing on the same torrent, shaping it, claiming it, becoming what his blood had always promised. But she was changing too. The hollow space in her chest, that aching emptiness she'd carried her entire life, suddenly filled.
Something immense unfurled inside her, stretching limbs that had been cramped for 18 years, opening eyes that had never seen, howling with a voice that shook the black glass walls. Her wolf. Not common, not ordinary, something ancient and rare that had waited generations for the right soul to carry. A spirit that matched the Shadow Court bloodline, because it had been need for exactly this purpose. Power flooded her veins, her senses exploded beyond anything she'd imagined possible. She felt every stone in the fortress, every breath of wind in the valley, every heartbeat of every wolf hunting them across the distant wilderness. She felt Ash, completely, utterly, eternally. Their bond no longer a thread, but a river, deep and unbreakable. When she opened her eyes, they glowed silver. The black glass walls reflected her transformation back at her, taller now, luminous, radiating power that made the air itself bow. The wolfless girl was gone. The queen of the Shadow Court stood in her place.
3 days later, they returned. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Something was coming. Something that made the old wolves tremble and the young ones whisper prayers to gods they'd forgotten. By the time Sera and Ash reached the territory's edge, every alpha within 100 miles had gathered in the central square, united against a common threat, terrified of what that threat might be. Sera walked through the gates she'd fled in desperation, her bare feet silent on cobblestones she'd scrubbed 1,000 times. But nothing else about her was the same. She moved like flowing water. She radiated light that had no source. Her silver eyes swept the gathered crowd with ancient authority that made seasoned warriors flinch. Beside her, Ash walked in human form, tall, devastating, every inch the king his bloodline had promised. Silver threads gleamed in his dark hair. His ember eyes burned with power barely contained. The air itself seemed to bow as he passed. The crowd parted before them like prey before predators. In the center of the square, the alphas waited, 12 of them, the most powerful wolves in the region, representing packs that had ruled for generations. They stood in a line, bristling with aggression and poorly hidden terror. Varn stood at their center, his scarred face twisted with desperate fury. Kill them now, before it's too late. They're abominations, corruptions of the natural order. Everything we built will crumble if we let them. Silence. Sera's voice wasn't loud. She didn't need volume. The word carried power that pressed against every mind present, demanding obedience on a level beyond conscious thought. Varn's mouth snapped shut. 20 years ago, Sera continued, her silver gaze moving across each alpha in turn, you murdered a royal family. You slaughtered pups in their beds. You burned a court that had protected your ancestors for 1,000 years, and you did it based on lies. She let the words settle, let the truth sink in. Lies spread by a wolf who wanted power he hadn't earned, who feared authority he couldn't control, who built his throne on the bones of innocence and taught you all to celebrate the massacre. Her eyes found Varn. Today, you have a choice. Bow and serve the true order, or stand and face judgment for crimes your kind has hidden for 2 decades. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, slowly, the youngest alpha, barely more than a boy who'd inherited his father's title the previous winter, dropped to his knees. Then another. Like dominoes falling, the proud wolves of the region surrendered to authority they couldn't deny. They felt it in their blood, in their bones, in the ancient instincts that remembered what true power looked like. Until only Varn remained standing. I will never bow to Shadow Court filth, he snarled, reaching for the silver blade at his hip.
I'll die before I—" His own enforcers grabbed him, the same wolves who'd hunted Sera through the wilderness, who'd torn apart her shelter, who'd followed every command for years. They forced their alpha to his knees in the mud. Because even blind loyalty couldn't overcome the truth radiating from the beings before them. Sera stepped forward until she stood directly over the wolf who'd ordered her death, the wolf whose daughter had tormented her for 18 years, the wolf who built an empire on genocide and called it natural order. "The natural order," Sera said softly, her voice carrying to every ear in the silent square. "Varn, you were right about one thing. The weak exist to serve the strong." She crouched down, meeting his terrified eyes with her glowing silver ones. "You just never understood who was truly weak." She rose and turned to Ash, taking his hand. Through their bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that they had always been meant for this moment. "My queen," he said, and the words rang across the square with the weight of prophecy fulfilled. Sera looked out at the kneeling alphas, at the watching crowd, at Lyra's face, pale with shock among the gathered wolves, at the world that had called her worthless, empty, better off drowned at birth. 3 copper coins, a dying pup, and the fall of every wolf who had ever mocked the girl they'd dismissed as nothing. The natural order hadn't been defied. It had finally, after 20 years of corruption and cruelty, been restored. And somewhere in the silence, she could almost hear the words of a prophecy whispered by a dying queen to her hidden son. "The heir will return with the one who sees worth in ashes. Together, they will make the false kings kneel." Together, they had. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. New stories await you every day. Until next time.